senior leadership of Iran, including the supreme leader. So it's clearly about regime change. The question is what sort of damage is going to have to take place before they think that they've actually achieved their goals in this regard.
Do you think that's a valid proposition to achieve regime change from the air, if you will?
No, I don't. And I think that any time that you've seen the fall of a regime in history, it has necessitated one of two things, either an external ground force or some sort of mass defection on the ground that then becomes the alternative source of authority. In this case, I don't think you have either one of those. We haven't seen an organized opposition on the ground that would be able to take power in Iran without there being additional forces from outside, and not from the air, but on the ground. And I don't think that we're going to see American troops or Israeli troops or any other troops that are going to be willing to go and actually put forces on the ground, boots on the ground.
Now let's talk about the Iranian reaction, the retaliation with the attacks in other Mideast countries. Is that what could be expected?
It was entirely expected. I don't think it's the best calculation. The idea seems to be that this will put pressure on these countries to then try to pull the Americans back and to end these strikes. What is equally likely, and frankly probably more likely at this point, is for those countries that didn't want this war, did not want these strikes on Iran, but for these countries to turn around and think, well, this is the chaos that we've been worried about, and we are now in the firing line. We are in the crosshairs. We are now targets. So they're going to be looking for ways to repel that threat, and repelling that threat is probably going to involve the Americans. I think that's a very likely scenario, that these strikes on these countries by the Iranian regime is likely to push them towards thinking that, well, maybe we should align more clearly with the American plan at this point, because the scenario has already unfolded. We're already in a war, and we need this to end.
Now, do you see this then as a brief, decisive campaign, as which it is surely planned, or is it likely to become a more prolonged affair?
I'm not sure it's planned as a brief, decisive campaign, unless you mean not years, but I don't think this is meant to be just a couple of days or something like that. I think that there's much more of an appetite in DC and among the Israelis to really go all the way when it comes to this. So this could be days, it could be longer. The issue, I think, is going to be when the Israelis and the Americans realize that if they're looking for regime change and there isn't an alternative source of authority on the ground that could take power, then what do? At this point, even if the top leadership of the Iranian regime were all to be assassinated, you still have arms, weapons, the monopoly of force being centered almost exclusively in regime institutions. So some sort of alternative authority is likely to arise, but it would be from within the regime. It wouldn't be, as of yet, it wouldn't be from outside of it. So barring any mass defections, I think that that's the way that's going to play out.
Now let's look at the other two major power centers globally, Russia and China, which have requested an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council. What can we expect from that meeting?
I think you can expect a lot of condemnations at the UN Security Council from the Russians, from the Chinese, and frankly from many in the global South with regards to this. A few isolated Western actors, for example, the Spanish and the Irish were pretty vocal, the Norwegians, the Swiss, in not wanting this to go forward. And now that it's gone forward, are still clear that they think that it shouldn't have gone forward and that they're looking for a way to de-escalate. But I don't think that any of this is going to materially stop the American-Israeli campaign. I think that they've decided that this is the way they want to go. They're not interested in some sort of restraint in this regard. If they see that they have an opportunity, then they're going to take it. That's exactly what they've done. And I think at the UN, it's going to be a lot of mudslinging in different directions. But operationally on the ground, I don't think much is going to change.
Now, given the fact that Trump came into office on the promise of ending wars and decidedly not starting new ones, how long can he keep that up? And at what stage will he lose support, both from his party and from his base?
So I think within the United States, this is likely to get fairly unpopular fairly quickly. There's the image of the background image of the Iraq War, something that Donald Trump himself talked very negatively about multiple times. I do think that he's going to keep striking Iran for the next few days at least. I wouldn't be surprised if it went on beyond that, and then try to recoup thereafter. But there's a definite desire to see the end of this regime and to engage accordingly. And if that's the stated aim, and it was made very clear today in the Truth Social video on his platform, then there's a lot more that he's going to have to do before he thinks that he's done all he can.
Thank you very much. H.A. Hellier, Senior Fellow in Security Studies at the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Fawaz Gerges is a professor of international relations at the London School of Economics. And earlier I asked him if Iranians are likely to heed Trump's call to overthrow their government.
I think it's too early. No one knows, no one, what will happen in Iran and the region in the next few days and next few months. But if you ask me as a historian, if history is a lesson, the Iranian people rally around the flag when their country is under attack. My fear is that President Trump's call for the Iranian people to rise up against the government, this is mainly could be suicidal for tens of thousands of Iranians, because the Iranian government still has a significant popular base of support. This is a call for civil strife. So even though we have to wait and see, I doubt it very much whether we're going to see millions of Iranians heading the call of either President Trump or Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
So do you think this is a recipe for civil war in Iran, rather?
Well, I think, again, we have to wait and see. The situation is in fluid. It's too early. It's the beginning of a long war. My take on it, and I could be wrong, the Iranian leadership is deeply entrenched. They have had time to plan and to coordinate their actions. And I think they're planning for a long war. It will be a long war. And I think the consequences for both the Iranian people and the region will be catastrophic for a variety of reasons. But at this particular moment, there is no clarity and there's a great deal of dust. And we are blinded by the dust. Two things we know for sure: that this is a coordinated war between Israel and the United States. And I think the overarching strategic aim of Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu is regime change in Iran. Do I really believe that Donald Trump could basically bring about, topple the Iranian government? No, I think it's wishful thinking. We have been there before. We have seen this show in the Middle East many times in the past 70 years or so.
So you don't think that Trump's goal of destabilizing the government, at least, and sort of trying to push the opposition, that is realistic?
Well, look, do I believe that the American-Israeli attacks on Iran will devastate Iran? Absolutely. I think what Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu are trying to do is to basically kill as many top leaders in Iran as possible, is to destroy the military and security and strategic infrastructure of Iran, is to wipe out any kind of really strategic weapons in Iran, and they could do so. But do I really believe that Donald Trump could bring about the Iranian government by air power? No, I don't. I don't think there is any military expert or historian who believes that air power on its own could bring about regime change, in particular in Iran. This Iranian government, the Islamic Republic, is deeply entrenched. It has a major popular support, even though millions of Iranians would like to bring about change in Iran, and we've seen the protesters. So, yeah, I think President Trump not only aim is unrealistic, I think it's wishful thinking. But the reality is, regardless of what we think of the Islamic Republic and its repressive nature, this is an illegal, unjust, and illegitimate war. It's a war of choice. And if you tell me as a historian to really summarize what we have seen, whether in June of last year or this year, I think we are seeing naked power as the dominant currency of politics and diplomacy. International institutions have been shattered to a million pieces.
Now, what kind of actions do you expect Iran to take now if they find themselves under continued waves of attack?
Well, look, I mean, I think Iran has very limited choices. Iran's skies are almost open. Its air defenses are non-existent. And that's why I believe that the American-Israeli attacks will be devastating to Iran. So Iran will try to prolong the war. Iran will play for time. Iran will basically realize this is a long game. And this is really the overarching strategic aim for Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu is regime change in Tehran. The overarching aim of the Iranian regime is basically resilience, is resistance, is to basically absorb the first and the second and the third shocks and basically continue to resist, even though what we have seen so far is a minimalist response on the part of the Iranian governments, because I think they are positioning themselves for a long, long war, as President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have made it very clear.
Last question, briefly, please. So you're saying that the strategy of the US and Israel is doomed to fail?
Absolutely. President Trump has made it very clear. His strategy is regime change. He has called on the Iranian people to basically revolt against government, and he has made it very clear he will try to wipe out the infrastructure, the security and the strategic infrastructure, and kill the security and the top leadership of Iran.
Thank you very much. Farwas Gerges there, Professor of International Relations at the London School of Economics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Blasts have been reported across the Gulf as Iran launches retaliatory strikes. Attacks have targeted the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan and Kuwait. Air raid sirens have also sounded as missile defenses spring into action. Iran had threatened to hit US bases in the region in case of attacks on its territory. DW reporter Emily Gordine is in Dubai. She told us how the Iranian attacks are affecting life there.
Well, people are mostly trying to go about their day as normal, but that's also partly due to the fact that they don't really have much of a choice. Shelters are not really part of the local infrastructure here. In Abu Dhabi, we are told some people did get alerts on their phones to seek shelter, or to at least stay inside, that is. In Dubai, when we earlier heard about explosions above the city, we did not receive any notifications on our phones. Of course, Dubai in general is considered one, if not the safest city in the world, and that's also one of the reasons for why tourists have continued to flock here despite possible conflict in the region. Now, tourists, when they leave the hotel, if they are, in the right moment, they will have seen explosions where rockets have been intercepted in the air. And so the image of Dubai certainly right now is getting a bit of a dent in terms of its, exemption of conflict and in the sense of that it is such a safe city.
Now, how have the Emirates responded to these latest attacks?
Well, the Emirati Foreign Ministry condemned the strikes. It called it a flagrant violation of national sovereignty and a clear breach of international law. The Emirates have also, they've closed the airspace, so there's no flights coming in and out of Dubai, out of anywhere in the United Arab Emirates. And again, we know that, in some places there have been alerts, like in Abu Dhabi, of recommending people stay indoors. But by and large, people have responded by going about their day as normal.
Now, Iran has retaliated against several Gulf states. Can you explain why?
That's right. Iran has retaliated, targeting Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait and Bahrain, and all of these countries are home to US military bases. So Bahrain, for example, hosts the US Fifth Fleet, and they've reported strikes at that naval base as well. Qatar has also reported strikes targeting the Al Udeid air base. And there's, I think, a plethora of reasons for why the Gulf states are hit here. I think, for one, they are close and they're in easy reach for the Iranians. Two, the Iranians are to a degree up against the wall, and that leaves a lot less for them to lose. And these countries are allies of the Americans. And I think the rationale here is, if you turn up the heat on these allies, then they will eventually put pressure on the Americans to wind down their operations. And observers there have also said that one of the goals here can also be attacks on, well, of course, we understand that these strikes so far have been limited to, or mostly limited to, military bases, or US military bases, but the rationale there is to target specifically American soldiers to increase the political cost, the political pressure on Donald Trump himself. And that's why observers certainly believe that in the next few days we will continue to see more strikes on the Gulf states, on US air bases in the Gulf states.
DW correspondent Emily Gordine there reporting from Dubai. Thank you, Emily. And we have more expertise here right in the studio. Our Middle East analyst, Shani Razanis, is joining us. Shani, we have the US joining Israel and taking on a major foe of Israel. Let's look at the Israeli side here. What is Israel's strategy?
Well, Netanyahu has a clear strategy. It's his goal since his first day in politics. He wants to get rid of the Iranian regime. That's something that he's been talking about again and again and again.
Ambitious, though.
Very ambitious. I think he had never expected in his wildest dream he'll get such cooperations from an American regime. Trump is the perfect partner for that. We also need to keep in mind, when we're talking about a regime change, toppling their regime, Israeli media has been throwing very big hints on the fact that the Israeli defense officials believe that they have managed to hit Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran themselves. Israeli media was working under the assumption that this assassination attempt has been at least somewhat successful. And they're trying to explain also the timing of the attack, as we've seen it together, in the sense of a very rare militarily operational window, when intelligence forces have realized that there's a big gathering of a lot of high-ranking Iranian politicians and military commanders. And this is why the timing was chosen as it was chosen today. We, of course, have no confirmations for it whatsoever. We do have an Iranian source talking to the Reuters news agency and approving that the defense minister has been hit, and as well as the high commander of the Revolutionary Guards. So somewhat of a success definitely there in Israel and America targeting the high-ranking levels of Iranian leadership.
Let's talk about this joint operation. How did they divide the work? Do we know that?
Yeah, well, a lot of intelligence. There's a very tight collaboration between Israel and the U.S. when it comes to security needs, when it comes to military exchange. CIA and the Mossad are working in Iran. There's a lot of covert operations we are not fully aware of, but there's no doubt Israel has shown it already when it managed to kill the leader of Hamas in the heart of the Tehran capital, in the heart of the Revolutionary Guards, resort in July of 24, showing its great superiority when it comes to intelligence on the ground in the capital of Iran. So Israel is the one, when we talk about the division of labor, who's doing what, the Israelis are dealing more with the personal attack on the leadership, trying to find the targets, the timing, their location,
So
following them.
intelligence of all.
Correct. And somewhat also focusing on the ballistic missiles. And for the Americans, the main goal seemed to have been the nuclear facilities. It's also technically, of course, it's strategically meeting, Trump's goals and statements, but it's also for technical reasons the need to get a bunker blasting bombs and the kind of airplanes you need for these strikes. This is something the Americans have and the Israelis are far more limited with. So this is what we know so far. So we still need to keep in mind this has been going on for a few good hours, but we're still, there's a lot of speculation. There's still a lot of dust up in the air. We still don't have the clear photo, but it's interesting to see that this is very clearly what the Israelis are saying. Their goal is to topple the regime, to get directly to the Iranian supreme leader. And we have to understand, in case this will be confirmed, this is, of course, major. This is an unbelievable change. It leaves so many, it opens so many questions into the future of Iran and what's happening next. I think both leaders, if you look now with this information, again, retrospectively, at what Netanyahu and Trump both saying, both turning to the Iranian people, telling them, this is your opportunity, this is your chance. I think they were counting on real, tangible possibility for a change based on the fact that the leadership of Iran might have been targeted and hit successfully today.
So if we're talking about the average Israeli citizen, how big is the support for this whole operation?
Well, I think, the mood fluctuates with the news as they come in. Of course, if there'll be a confirmation, if there's a success, there's great support for Israel there. The Iranian threat is something that has been looming over the Israelis for many years. And of course, Netanyahu supporters are aware of this threat, which has been a very major pillar of his defense strategy for many years. At the same time, also, it seems there's a lot of content in Israel for the quite timid Iranian response and for the success of the Israeli defense mechanism defense systems to actually intercept most of the barrage, most of the attack on Israel. So as long as this keeps going on, I think Netanyahu is going to get only support from wall to wall. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of comments and response we will get from the U.S. as the day there begins and people, are waking up. Capitol Hill is waking up. D.C. is waking up. We know there's been very little support for this operation beforehand. It's interesting to see what will be the responses today.
Now, let's talk about the Palestinian reaction to all this in the West Bank and in Gaza. Have you heard anything?
Well, we need to keep in mind, Israeli civilian front, as they call it, is quite well used to this and also well equipped. Many Israelis have shelter and safe spaces to go into. And there's a whole procedure of what you do once you hear the sirens. This is not the case for Palestinians in the West Bank, definitely not for Palestinians in Gaza. And we have seen miscalculation. It's very hard, the distance that the Iranian missiles need to cross in order to make it to that region. There's also been interceptions that had fallen in the parts of the Palestinian territories. There's great danger, there's great panic, there's great fear there. That's on the civilian, most immediate response of the Palestinians. But if you see it in the bigger, like more from the political side, I think there's still great support for Hamas among Palestinians, definitely in the West Bank, and the Iranians would be very happy to see this attack triggering any sort of response, any sort of violent response from the Palestinians in the West Bank. And this is something Israelis are taking into account. Israel had a special recruit of soldiers, of reserve soldiers, spread all over Israel, in the north waiting for Hezbollah, but also along the West Bank waiting to see if there might be tensions flaring up there or in occupied Jerusalem.
Middle East analyst Shani Rozan is there. Thank you, as ever. You're watching DW News. Here is a reminder of our top story. Israel and the US have launched a series of coordinated attacks on Iran. President Donald Trump says their aim is to annihilate the regime's naval and missile capabilities. Iran says it has launched drones and missiles against Israel and US bases elsewhere in the region. France and Bahrain have initiated an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council on the crisis. And that's it for now. I'll be back at the top of the hour.
A Parisian must. Why a brasserie is the go-to place for classic French cuisine. Life abroad. How American dancer Zach Enquist has made Sweden his new home. And would you try the Galician octopus that is winning over palates worldwide? These stories and more coming up on Euromax. Craving French classics like coq au vin, oysters, or ratatouille? Then come along as we step inside an authentic brasserie.
If you want to dine like the French, a visit to a brasserie is a must. The word brasserie actually means brewery. Of course, today it's much more than that. So what makes it so typically French? And why do the French love it so much?
People come here for the atmosphere, but also for the anonymity. You mingle with other people without knowing who they are. It's very discreet here. And